1, 2, 3, 4. I got thoughts running through my head. I got thoughts, can't you see? I got thoughts, the books I read. I got thoughts, won't you listen to me?
Welcome back to The Author Has Thoughts. I am the author in question, Gary Ballard, and you are watching a video on my third novel, If Tribe Equals. There's already been I don't know how many parts before, but this is a continuation of that. The barn was is the meeting place for the Los Magos shot callers, and I didn't want to just have let's meet in a warehouse, although we had that later with all of them. But I wanted the Los Magos to have something cool. So they're on trains, so I thought the barn would be a train that never stopped. It's always moving, always a different location, and it doesn't even stop to board passengers. It just slows down enough that you can jump over the tracks to another one. Now, I don't know if this is possible with how LA's subways are built. I honestly don't care. I just think it would. I think it would make a cool image. So I wrote that. So Bridge has to jump across into the barn. So they go to the barn, have this meeting with the shot callers, and doesn't really go well. Stonewall is made, Los Res Magus. Stonewall is sort of made the head of Los Magos almost by default. Nobody else wants it. Everybody thinks he'd be good at it anyway. So he has to take the mantle of leadership, Pedro, and make a decision on what they do. How do they respond? And in the midst of discussing how they respond to El Diablo's aggression, El Diablo's attacks with a rocket, blows up the train at the barn. And Bridge saves most, or Mew saves most of the folks with a force field. And I wanted to kind of use Mew as not really a get-out-of-jail-free card for Bridge, or protection for Bridge, but a way to show, number one, how powerful the Technomancers are, and number two, to see Bridge kind of relying on that and becoming more, almost like he's leveling up by using it. If it's an RPG or a game like that, he's leveling up into, he's tougher, he can handle more, but more gets thrown at him. Barn gets destroyed, and Stonewall doesn't really have much choice. He was going to try to make, he's still going to try to make peace with El Diablos, and he gets Bridge to try to broker the peace. Because, Bridge is Bridge. He's been trying to get business with Los Magos for a while now, which is one of the reasons that the other shot callers don't really like Bridge. It's because Bridge has no loyalty. He's just, I'm all about business. I'm all about getting my papers, and I don't care who I work with. For the most part, that's not exactly true, but it's Bridge, so nobody trusts him. And Stonewall's like, look, if anybody can get this done, he can do it. He can sell ice cubes to he can sell ice cubes to an Eskimo, that kind of thing. And to a certain extent, that's sort of true. Bridge gets sent to meet with El Diablos. And El Diablos are old school Mexican gangsters. They're the ones, if you watch The Shield, they're the guys doing the shit. They're guys busting shit up, selling drugs, killing people. They're the worst idea of gangsters you can think of. In order to get the meeting with El Diablos, because they're not really taking a meeting even from Bridge. Bridge has to work a little magic. And I wanted to kind of bring back a character from the first book, Sid, the kind of poser, trend humping musician type, and I wanted to make him useful. Bridge needs an in with El Diablos. Sid has it, but in order to do it, Sid wants what he's always wanted, which is an A&R guy to listen to his demos. And Bridge knows A&R guys. So Bridge brings his demos to the A&R guy he knows that will listen. And that's Baku Baku. Now, Baku Baku is a bit of a stereotype. And reading it now, I can recognize that I probably went a little overboard on the stereotype of the kind of Persian Asian, or not Persian Asian, Persian Arab party guy trader, and trader's in Trader. Um, he's very much kind of a stereotype. I don't even know what his real name is. Baku Baku is possibly his first name and last name. Don't know. But I want to bring up, as I'm thinking about Baku Baku, I want to bring up the stereotypes. And you could probably take my book, this book's particularly, and tear through stereotypes, because there are stereotypes all through it. And I'm trying to, when I use the stereotypes, I'm trying to not necessarily subvert your expectations of them, but I'm taking those stereotypes and I'm saying, okay, maybe, but here's why, or here's a thing. I'm trying to look at the stereotype of, say, the Mexican gangster, or the angry black protester, or the Arab trader, and I'm trying to give it a little facet that maybe takes it beyond a stereotype. Now, I can look at this and I want to kind of address it in terms of white guilt and cultural appropriation. White guilt was something that was kind of around back then. Cultural appropriation wasn't really being talked about when I wrote this book. I think in like 2010 or something. I'm sure there were people talking about it, but it wasn't as big a thing as it is now. And I kind of want to address that. Nobody's ever, criticized me for my portrayals of racial stereotypes or races, other races in here. Nobody's ever accused me of any of that. Maybe it's just because not enough people have read it. Possible. I want to kind of address that because I can feel some of that, white guilt in the writing, in my need to make these racial stereotypes into positive characters, protagonists at least, that we can sympathize with, as well as kind of, you could probably say that I take the tack that all the white people are evil. Well, in this one they kind of are, but not all of them. And not all of the Mexican gangster stereotypes are bad people. I mean, Stonewall is a very intelligent person who is attempting to make a better life for himself and his set, his gang, his tribe. And so I don't know that I could ever be accused of really going full white guilt on this or full cultural appropriation, but I'm sure there's some people that would criticize me for it because I am I will gladly admit I am a product of a white middle-class suburban background. I grew up in the country, but by the time I was like 13, we had moved to the suburbs. It was one of the nicer suburbs around here. And so, I've grown up a very privileged, pampered life. Privileged not just in the fact that, I've been middle class. We've always been kind of struggling middle class, but still, middle class economy. I've never really, never really had to deal with bone-crushing poverty. Also privilege of being white. In America, in the South, in Mississippi, in the suburbs. The only way I could possibly have been more white privileged growing up and even into, my adulthood now is if I was rich, which is where the real privilege lives. But, so, I've grown up in white privilege, and unfortunately, I have not been exposed to as many different cultures as I would like. Certainly not a lot of, Mexican Latino culture. It's only been in the last, say, 10 years or so that Mississippi in this area has had any significant influx of Central American Mexican immigrants. I've certainly not met many Jewish people. I've not I just have not been around a lot of different cultures because Mississippi, lived here all my life, is a very culturally homogenous place. We have a pretty decent, selection, or not selection. We have a pretty decent sized African American population, but it's mostly white. When I was going to high school, my school district was like 90% white. And so, my exposure to cultures has been, unfortunately, very sparse. And I hope, and this is something I hope that my portrayal of races and cultures that did not grow up in, I'm not familiar with, and languages and such, I hope it is not offensive. It's not meant to be offensive. I'm trying to be somewhat authentic and, learn about the culture and, learn a little bit of the language, not that I can speak it, but just to use little bits and pieces and phrases. So I want to be, I'd say, culturally sensitive to these other cultures. But again, I'm also writing about gangsters and, criminals, gangsters and criminals, the stereotypes of a lot of these immigrant minority populations. And I did not want it to be, these are just stereotypes. I want it to be, these are reasons for the stereotypes. And it goes back to that tribalism and, the existence of gangs. As I said before, gangs were formed to protect vulnerable communities, usually communities of immigrants and minorities. And, they obviously will morph into other things because of the power that they are given, or, because of the corrupting influence of money, that sort of thing. But, essentially gangs at their heart are about the protection of the community to start. And that's what the five families are about. Well, in this case, they need protection, both from each other and from the system that, in this case, is the corporate-run system that is attempting to exploit them and exploit their property, exploit their land for its own purposes. Bridge gets Sid his listening with the Baku Baku, and Baku Baku, and Sid gives Bridge the end with El Diablos. In the meeting, in the middle of that, Baku Baku does a favor for somebody else by getting Bridge to talk to the mayor, Mayor Arturo Soto, which was the mayor that was elected at the end of Under the Amoral Bridge. And I wanted to bring Soto back because, well, number one, my initial impression of him, the guy I based that character around, was Captain Acevedo on The Shield, played by a very fine actor. And, that's the guy, if I'm thinking of somebody to play him in a TV series or movie, to play Soto, that's the guy, because that's who he was physically based off of, as well as some of the mannerisms of that character. So Soto comes in, and he basically tells Bridge, I want Stonewall. This war is gonna, we're gonna destroy shit. If this gang war keeps up, we're gonna just take them all out. But if you give me Stonewall, I'll see what I can do. Bridge, is not known for his loyalty. He certainly doesn't have a reputation for being loyal, but in this case, Bridge doesn't hand him over, or at least doesn't immediately hand him over. Now, maybe he would have done so initially. Maybe he would have done so eventually, but not so much anymore. So, the El Diablos meeting had gone nowhere. So Bridge just kind of, he tells Stonewall, look, I'm out. I did what I could. I talked to El Diablos. They ain't budging it, but I'll give you a little hint. Watch yourself, because they're armed to the teeth with some of the best gear I've seen. Stuff that the cops don't even have necessarily. And I don't know where they got it, but it wasn't from me. So, watch yourself. This is bad, but I'm out. And, he goes and buries his head Rest in peace, Neil Peart. Greatest drummer ever.